This is the intersection of 2nd and Virginia Street in downtown Reno, and I will humbly proclaim that this is the most historic intersection in the biggest little city in the world. Each of the buildings on these four corners has a storied past, and this is the location of some of the oldest, if not the oldest, commercial buildings in downtown Reno. As great as this city is, one of the things that we have not done well is to preserve buildings from Reno's early days. And the buildings behind me are actually some of the last ties that we have to old downtown Reno. So let's take a look at the Oddfellows building, the Club Cal Neva, the Reno National Bank, and the Byington building here on the Reno You Know. Here on the southwestern corner of 2nd and Virginia, behind the gloriously tacky signage of the gift shop and the pawn shop that were here previously, stands one of, if not the oldest commercial building in downtown Reno. This used to be known as the IOOF, or the Oddfellows building, and this was constructed in 1876. This building was standing here just 11 years after the end of the Civil War, and 8 years after the first Transcontinental Railroad came through in 1868, which founded the town of Reno. So we can pretty much say that this building has been here as long as the town itself.
The International Order of Oddfellows needed a meeting space, so in 1876 they purchased this lot from the city's founder, Myron Lake, for $3,000. They had this building constructed to house facilities for the order on the second floor, and presumably to help pay for the structure, they built space for a bank and a furniture store on the ground floor. The first bank tenant was called the Reno Savings Bank, which was organized in the same year that the building went up. The exterior was in an Italianate style, which was the order of the day, and had a cast iron facade that was made by the Reno Iron Works.
Dear viewers, I'd like to encourage you to please click that subscribe button. A lot of people are watching this channel, but according to my statistics, about 88% of those watching have not yet subscribed. If we're able to grow this channel, I'll be able to cover more topics, generate even better content, and maybe even attract some interesting guests. Thank you.
In 1887, this building became the property in the new home of the First National Bank of Reno. In 1896, this bank changed its name to the Washoe County Bank, and in the ensuing years, the entire building was renovated and the Italianate motif was replaced with a more traditional Renaissance revival feel. George Wingfield, who was once considered the owner of Nevada and one of its most prominent citizens, acquired the bank in 1929. This bank and others struggled along until the Great Depression finally caught up with it, and it went into receivership. In 1935, the building was sold to Elizabeth Stack, who interestingly was the mother of Robert Stack of television's The Untouchables. She leased the building to a William Ramos, who operated the Ramos drugstore here until 1951. Then in 1952, Edis's Jewelers moved in from another location close by and operated here for 30 years until 1982.
There were several other tenants in this building over the years, including yet another bank, a liquor store, and a topless bar. And today the building sits mostly vacant, and it still houses some of the inventory of the gift shop that last haunted this 148-year-old building.
Years ago, I thought this place would be a great location for a museum pertaining to Reno's city and gambling history. And one day I even took off all the glitzy ornamentation in Photoshop to help visualize what it might look like. But it's not up to me. So if you're interested in leasing this unique piece of Reno history, just contact the realtor's number displayed in the windows.
On the southeast corner of this intersection is the Club Cal Neva, which was licensed and opened in November of 1948 and has been mostly in continuous operation since then. And as a point of note, I know that dude in the photo. So if you're watching, hey John. The Club Cal Neva originally opened in this location in 1948, which is the corner of 2nd and Center Streets. And it took the location of the old Club Fortune, which in the preceding 10 years was the leading and fashionable casino in Reno. $500,000 in 1948 dollars was used to remodel the old Club Fortune into the Cal Neva, and an emphasis was placed on entertainment. There were 2 floor shows here nightly, and in 1949, a relatively unknown pianist played a 2-week gig here, and he was so well liked that a couple months later they brought him back for another 2-week gig. Well done, Liberace.
In December of 1951, the owners declared that they would close until the following May since the winter months were unprofitable. This prompted the attention and the ire of the Reno City Council, since it didn't make the city look good and it put about 100 people out of work. This scrutiny convinced the owners to reopen in February, and also resulted in the city passing a law that casinos could not close during the winter months. At its peak, the Cal Neva employed 1,400 people. There were major renovations and expansions in 1969, 1972, and 1980, and the 1980 expansion resulted in the Cal Neva arriving at this corner of 2nd and Virginia, which previously was the home of Skeel's Drug Store. Today, the entire casino takes up most of the city block, and that's all casino. There have never been hotel rooms here. The Cal Neva is an old warhorse that keeps soldiering on and is one of the last, if not the last, link to Reno gaming in the early days.
This impressive building on the northeast corner is one that locals kind of take for granted, but this is possibly one of the best architectural links that we have to old Reno. George Wingfield, who Reno's Wingfield Park was named for, was a mover and shaker in early 20th century Reno. He made his mark and his money in Goldfield and Tonopah, Nevada during their silver and gold mining booms. And in 1908, he moved to Reno with his business partner, George Nixon.
He invested his money in cattle ranches, real estate, and a total of 12 banks. This is how he got the reputation as the man who owned Nevada. Of all his banks, this is the only one that he had constructed, and it went up in 1915. The architect was Reno's most prolific, Frederick de Longchamp, who designed the structure in a classical revival style. George Wingfield kept his offices on the 2nd floor, and much later Bill Harrah would keep other executive offices on the 4th floor.
In 1932, during the Great Depression, George Wingfield's banks became overextended and they all closed. And following George Wingfield's bankruptcy in 1935, this building was purchased by the First National Bank building. They changed the signs and they operated here for many years. Later on, this was the home of the First Interstate Bank, which was operating here when this building went on the National Register of Historic Places in 1986.
About 20-something years ago, this building was the home of Planet Hollywood, Reno, which moved in 1994. The Planet Hollywood chain recruited a variety of stars to be spokespeople and endorsers, the biggest of which were Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis. Many people don't know this, but when Planet Hollywood opened here, Bruce Willis and his blues band performed here on this corner on an elevated stage. I was one of the crowd in attendance, and I can't believe I didn't have a camera with me. This was during the days when cameras only used film. Maybe I thought I wouldn't get any good shots. I don't remember. Later on, this building became the Ichiban restaurant, and the building was sold in early 2020 with the rest of Harrah's Reno, and the project being worked on this whole city block is now called the Reno City Center, which will be a combination of residences, shopping, and entertainment. As of the date of this filming, it's unclear how this historic structure will be integrated into the overall plan. The last reminders of Planet Hollywood are these casts of stars' signatures and hand and footprints, which are slowly being removed. Hopefully they'll be preserved and maybe used in the new project somehow.
This old building on the northwest corner bears little resemblance to its original look because of several remodels and reconstructions, but the bones of this building actually date back to the 1870s. This was known as the Byington building, and back in the day this was one of the best business addresses to have in Reno.
A family named Byington purchased this lot in 1877 and built the original building to have offices on the upper floors and retail on the ground floor. There was a large social hall on the second floor that was rented out for events, celebrations, and other gatherings. And it was in this hall in 1925 that a huge fire broke out, causing extensive damage. The Byington family reached out to architect Frederick de Longchamp in 1926 to completely redesign the building, which when completed created 46 offices on the upper floors, which were soon occupied by doctors, lawyers, dentists, and other professionals. The exterior brickwork was covered with stucco at this point, and the fact that this was a brick building in the early years helped it survive the fires that came through town.
A series of drugstores operated on the ground floor, and in 1929 Walgreens moved in, and this was the location of Reno's first Walgreens. And this next part I didn't know until I started researching this video. In 1959, Harrah's leased the entire second and third floor back there and used those floors as executive offices, and Bill Harrah himself had a corner office up there. And they actually stayed in those floors until the 1990s when that lease expired.
As far as I know, the upper floors here are still vacant with just a little retail going on the ground floor. It's hard to envision today what a significant building this used to be, but it was. Hopefully redevelopment will come someday for this grand old lady at 2nd and Virginia.
All right, I'm finishing up this episode here at the Silver Peak Bar and Grill and Tap Room. Bar and Tap Room, Grill and Bar and Tap Room, the Silver Peak on 1st and Sierra, which is only about a block from our historic intersection. And today I'm super excited about this beer. This is the newest seasonal from Sierra Nevada. This follows up Celebration Ale, which will sell through now that the holidays are done. So this is brand new, fresh, an Imperial IPA from Sierra Nevada. Hot Bullet, check it out at your local watering hole. And that's all I got for you today. I sure hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for hanging out. I hope you learned something. And as Harold S. Smith Sr. of Harold's Club always said, I'm with you. Cheers.